Well, this plane crash just broke the heart of America. They're still pulling bodies out. They've got about 20 or so to go. About 40 have been pulled from the icy Potomac River so far. Hello, everyone. You know about the collision between that Black Hawk helicopter and the American Airlines jet at about 9 o'clock last night. We are getting all kinds of information. For instance, in the tower, it looks like there was one person on duty for a responsibility that really required two people. One person handling takeoffs and landings. Now, we don't know if that's the pertinent factor that led to what happened, but it's something to make note of. And also this, that aviation is still the safest way to go, and we are a lot better than we were in the 70s, 80s, and 90s. I mean, take a look at that. We hardly ever have these anymore, but we probably shouldn't have had this one. This one was caught on camera. The camera, now I know from President Trump, that we're looking at, or looking from, is on the Kennedy Center. You saw that little flash. Here it is again. The big orb is the jet, and here comes the helicopter. And they both go down. They both go down. You know, it's interesting, after a mishap, an aviation mishap, the professionals pretty much know right away what happened. There was a massive, massive emergency response, aviation response. The investigators, the professionals, the pilots, they start talking amongst themselves about what happened. And, well, they share that information with themselves. They often don't share it with the public. President Trump is sharing what he knows with the public. And it's refreshing. It's a little bit different. But he tells us what he knows because I think he respects us. And this is what I would want to know as a pilot. Hey, what really happened here? What do we know so far? He's telling the people. They've told him, and now he's telling us.
You had a airliner coming in, American Airlines. He was doing everything right. He was on track. He was the same track as everybody else. They came in. It's probably the same track as they've had for 25 years or more. He's coming in the path. And for some reason, he had a helicopter that was at the same height, obviously when they hit, but pretty much the same height, and going at an angle that was unbelievably bad. When the air traffic controller said, do you see, he was talking about, do you see him? But there was very little time left when that was stated. And then also, he said, follow him in. And then almost immediately after that, seconds after that, there was the crash that took place.
I appreciate the directness. Some of this may have to be revised later, but when you see the NTSB, and they're good people at the National Transportation Safety Board, but they spend an awful lot of time telling us about their procedures. And sometimes it seems like they're holding back information rather than sharing information, promoting the NTSB brand. And from President Trump, well, we're getting information. As they're relaying it to him, he's relaying it to us.
You had a pilot problem from the standpoint of the helicopter. I mean, because it was visual. It was a very clear night. It was cold but clear, and clear as you could be. The American Airlines plane had lights blazing. They had all of their landing lights on. I could see it from the Kennedy Center tape. We had a tape up on the Kennedy Center. That seems to be the primary. Thus far, I'm sure we'll see other tapes because it's such an area where there are a lot of cameras looking up into the air.
The Kennedy Center, yeah, just the roof of the Kennedy Center is where we actually saw where the camera was placed. I haven't seen any other footage, though, of the mishap. None that I've seen. I think there's some computer animations and that kind of thing. All right, but what about the helicopter not taking any kind of evasive maneuver?
The helicopter had vision of the plane because you had vision of it all the way, perfect vision of it all the way from at Kennedy Center where the tape was taken. And for some reason, There weren't adjustments made. Again, you could have slowed down the helicopter substantially. You could have stopped the helicopter. You could have gone up. You could have gone down. You could have gone straight up, straight down. You could have turned. You could have done a million different maneuvers. For some reason, it just kept going.
Interesting. He knows about helicopters, too. We don't have many presidents who own their own helicopter 40 or so years before they became president. But I think this is what has got a lot of people talking. The lower standards of the Department of Transportation, the FAA, under the Obama and Biden administrations.
The FAA is actively recruiting workers who suffer severe intellectual disabilities, psychiatric problems, and other mental and physical conditions under a diversity and inclusion hiring initiative spelled out on the agency's website. Can you imagine? Targeted disabilities are those disabilities that the federal government, as a matter of policy, has identified for special emphasis in recruitment and hiring. The FAA's website states they include hearing, vision, missing extremities, partial paralysis, complete paralysis, epilepsy, severe intellectual disability, psychiatric disability, and dwarfism all qualify for the position of a controller of airplanes pouring into our country, pouring into a little spot, a little dot on the map, a little runway.
Yeah, the scandal is that this actually does exist, that this was policy. Not that he's saying it out loud. That's okay. He has the form, I have the form, and all these disabilities are actually listed on it. Everything from autism to deafness to blindness to intellectual disability. It's something out of Mad Magazine or something like that. You never, ever would have thought that this could be part of aviation policy, but here it is. And remarkably, whenever there's a mishap in America, you see senators responding after the fact with their solutions. This is one of the cases where beforehand, before something horrible happens, you have a leader highlighting that something bad could happen if action isn't taken fast. This is just after he became president last week.
Second, for your signature, we have a presidential memorandum titled Immediate Assessment of Aviation Safety. In light of the damage done to aviation safety by the Biden administration's DEI and woke policies, what this presidential memorandum orders is for your Secretary of Transportation and FAA Administrator, in this case acting FAA Administrator, to basically ensure that we are actively undoing all of that damage, that we are assessing how much damage was done, and that we're ensuring that people hired within the FAA, in keeping with your memorandum of January 21st, are only the most outstanding, capable people for the jobs that they're being hired into.
In other words, competence.
Yes, sir. Elevating competence over everything else instead of the DEI policies that were pursued by the Biden administration.
I think everyone understands that.
All right. And actually, that may have been signed a bit more recently, although they did sign that executive action on January 21st as well, another one related to aviation. Let's take a look at that tower. Let's take a look at that control room. You only had one person doing the job of two people. That's terrible. Now, President Trump is getting information that the rest of us don't necessarily get. That's the thing the fake news never really gave him credit for. He's the president. They're not. He has access to data. People come and tell him things that they're not going out and telling reporters first thing. Remember that whenever they come out and say this.
This morning, President Trump claimed without any evidence that DEI, diversity policies, were the reason for the crash.
He blamed DEI policies and hiring practices when still hours later he has presented no evidence.
You have the President of the United States telling you that your loved one was killed because of DEI when he has zero evidence, and I mean zero, I mean less than zero, to suggest that's true.
Any organization that spends any amount of time seeking out for sensitive positions, people with significant intellectual disabilities, everything's on the table. It's all interrelated. And what does the president know that these people don't? there's that as well. Just because it's not in the New York Times doesn't mean it hasn't happened. And here's something that happened for 4 years. Secretary Pete Buttigieg was the man in charge of the Department of Transportation. Why was he in charge of that department? It's a big, big job, and he did not have any qualifications for it. He had been the small town mayor, South Bend, Indiana, fine community, but that's not the training ground to be a cabinet secretary. Shall we review? He got the job because he's gay. Doesn't really mean anything to anybody, but to the writers of the political stories, they could not stop. They were just fascinated by this guy's sexuality, and they would not stop writing about it, and that's what made him a superstar, and that's why they had to give him that job in transportation. And when he gets the job, is he really into doing the work? No, he's into the perks. See on the little credenza there, whatever, see those helicopters? Those aren't airliners. Those aren't American Airlines or Southwest. Those are fancy military aircraft that you and I can't ride on, like the Osprey. That's what he fixates on. I'm in government. I get to fly on this. Every now and then, I get to fly on Marine One with the presidency. With the president. That makes me cool. They're all in it for the perks, not the hard work. And President Trump certainly has this guy's number.
The FAA, which is overseen by Secretary Pete Buttigieg, a real winner. That guy's a real winner. Do you know how badly everything's run since he's run this Department of Transportation? He's a disaster. He was a disaster as a mayor. He ran his city into the ground, and he's a disaster now. He's just got a good line of bull.
Well, he's got you there, Pete. He's got you there. Hey, one other thing about Washington, D.C. and helicopters they should look at. There are too many flying very, very low. I know it's fun, but I want to show you something. I lived in Washington for about 4 years. I can actually see my apartment in this photo, and I'm going to show you. My apartment was right here, okay? And one night, I'm standing right there in my living room. I almost feel like you can see me, all right? A helicopter came by below me, all right? Was flying right there. I'm here looking down at a helicopter. That's not a very tall building. I know it's fun and all, but a little bit too many helicopters flying low altitude. All right, next, please.
He's taking these shots, this antagonism, this taunting to the intelligence community.
You take on the intelligence community, they have 6 ways from Sunday at getting back at you. So even for a practical, supposedly hard-nosed businessman, he's being really dumb to do this.
The intelligence community taking revenge on the American people and their political leaders after all their failures? Yes, after September 11, 2001, after no weapons of mass destruction in Iraq when they told us there would be weapons of mass destruction in Iraq, after the Afghanistan loss that was predictable, which was preventable. No one wants to ask hard questions of the intelligence community except for certain brave individuals like President Trump, like Tulsi Gabbard. She is the nominee for the Directorate of National Intelligence, and she raised these issues, the failure, the intelligence, the calamities, and she's not afraid to talk about it and say she'll address it.
For too long, faulty, inadequate, or weaponized intelligence have led to costly failures and the undermining of our national security and God-given freedoms enshrined in the Constitution. The most obvious example of one of these failures is our invasion of Iraq based upon a total fabrication or complete failure of intelligence. This disastrous decision led to the deaths of tens of thousands of American soldiers, millions of people in the Middle East, mass migration, destabilization, and undermining of the security and stability of our European allies, the rise of ISIS, strengthening of al-Qaeda and other Islamist jihadist groups, and strengthening Iran.
One of the reasons we haven't had more accountability about the weapons of mass destruction that warrant is because just about everybody in Congress voted for that invasion, and everybody's looking the other way. They give her a hard time for being with President Assad of Syria. She wasn't the only one. That's Nancy Pelosi, all right, making a trip a while back to see President Assad of Syria.
Information. Truth is freedom. Is Newsmax. It's real news for real people.